From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join the conversation. It's a bonus episode with a special guest to discuss the Las Vegas world record orgy.
Orgy!
So get the kids away from the speakers and buckle in for some fun.
Oh, yeah.
And now, broadcasting from Level 9 Studios, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some pod therapy.
It's time for some pod orgy therapy, Nick. Or jerapy? Is that what we call it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's introduce our special guest. We have with us Dr. Victoria Hartmann. She is a board-certified clinical sexologist in private practice and visiting professor for clinical sexology to the Institute of Advanced Study of Human Sexuality in San Francisco. She is also currently the executive director of the Las Vegas Erotic Heritage Museum. She's a workshop facilitator, researcher, publisher, author, speaker, consultant on women's sexuality, advocate for transgender rights, and our special friend. We love you so much, Dr. Hartmann. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you. And if you've lived in a cave for the last couple of weeks, maybe you don't know this, but Las Vegas went for the world record in orgy. Now an Olympic event. We went for the gold medal, and Dr. Hartmann ended up getting roped into this and became a national headline. She was probably only, superficially aware of the thing, and then all of a sudden, she and the Erotic Heritage Museum became front page news as part of this. So, yes. Dr. Hartmann, we are so excited for you to be here, and we have so many listeners that have been just absolutely ginned up for this. They are pumped. We are pumped, and we are so grateful for you. So, thank you for coming.
Absolutely, absolutely. What a great intro. Thank you.
Yeah.
We tried to remind people.
You did all the work. We just read it.
We literally, we read your resume. You did that. It took me less time to read it than it did for you to do it. But we are super pumped to have you and so excited to hear about everything. We want to know about sexology. We want to know about the Erotic Heritage Museum. We want to hear, of course, about this exciting orgy and what that was all about. And Nick and I thought about doing a live podcast from the orgy, but we weren't sure if we were allowed to be there with raincoats and hazmat suits and just like...
You would have been drowned out.
Yeah, probably.
Literally and figuratively as well.
Sitting there with our little radios, like, and now it's happened. Like I imagined it like a National Geographic thing. Yeah. Like David Attenborough, like sitting there like, yes, he's approaching the female.
It would have been fun to narrate.
That would have been really fun.
Yeah.
Like a human mating ritual on the Serengeti. Watch as he approaches. Gathers the scent.
Next on National Geographic.
They wait for Barry Manilow to begin. And as the chorus comes on.
That would have been more fun to be a DJ.
Right?
Oh, yeah. But, I would never want to DJ an orgy because the requests have got to be ridiculous.
Well, what would the pace be of the music?
Yeah, where are we going with this?
What's the beat going to be?
Yeah. No, but you do need to have a beat. You need to have a beat.
Right?
There needs to be something in the background. It can't just be
2/4,
right. This mountain of humanity with no sound. Like I need something. I hope there's an air conditioner on or like a loud fan.
Scorching, right?
Yeah, that's just all. I feel like I'm at a plumbing convention. This is very odd.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Victoria, I'm so excited to have you already. You have met my standard.
I like your guys' attitude already.
So I guess first off, we should figure out, or we should have a discussion about like what is a sexologist?
Yes.
Can you describe that for our listeners?
Yes. Well, it's a really good question, and it has a lot of myth attached to it and misconceptions. So a sexologist is someone who does not operate from a sickness or sin perspective. Okay.
Right.
When someone comes in, let's say my area of expertise is paraphilias.
Yes. You have to tell the listener what that is.
Okay, so paraphilia is what is considered, in quotes, an unusual sexual variant.
Right. So we might be talking about voyeurism.
Voyeurism or a foot fetish. Or,
fetishes.
Right, fetishes.
Yeah, okay.
So when folks come to me because of what I studied and what I was in practice for, let's say someone came in and said, well, I'm interested, I watch pornography that includes transsexual or transgendered people, and that's where I get my excitement from. And my wife or spouse is having a real problem with that. So my job is to first examine where that origin might be. If there's not disordered behavior, but if there's maladaptive behavior that's attached to it,
Right.
and how to effectively manage it so that that person doesn't feel repressed.
Yes.
So, because a lot of times repression is what leads to acting out behavior.
I see.
Right. So my job is to find a way to help them manage or to work with them together
Yeah.
to find management skills so that they can get their needs met and to be able to still function in either their relationship or in society as a whole.
And one of the key things I heard you say in the beginning there is we do not take a shame perspective. We do not take a pathology perspective.
No.
And it's interesting, guys, what you don't understand if you're not sort of an initiated therapist here is that when she's quoting paraphilias, she's quoting a chapter from the DSM-5,
Right.
that psychology Bible thing. And because it's in there, that means it's considered de facto a pathology, a
Right.
bad thing
Right.
that should be addressed.
It's disorder.
But I notice you immediately reframe that and grab it and say, hold on. Let's not take these and immediately shame them because that's an ignorant approach, right? Let's be sex positive.
Right.
And then let's understand, how does this behavior find its natural way to exist legitimately and authentically? And how do we navigate the obstacles of life? Because it's true, we're in relationship, there's other people that matter in our life, and your job's to come in and sort of reconcile your legitimate human desire that you should not be ashamed of with this larger culture or your other commitments.
Correct. Yeah,
Very
that's a
interesting.
really good summary. And when I was doing my dissertation, I was immediately drawn to what's considered the darkest part of paraphilia, which is
yeah.
necrophilia.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought I was a big badass and had coined
Yeah.
this term progressive paraphilia. I'm going to find a way to figure out that this is progressive. So, if there's acting out behavior, I can be the one to stop it.
okay.
A young scientist
Yeah, right.
and
We're always trying to coin terms in that PhD
yeah,
thesis.
right. And the great thing about science is you're usually wrong. And what I found was not only are at least those that I studied are not likely to act out criminally, but also if they had a partner or someone that they could communicate their desires with,
Right.
any maladaptive behavior that might have been attached to the repression of the paraphilia was diminished or went away completely.
And I'm going to translate that because
Okay.
this is good because
Yeah,
this
I'm
is
using a lot of lingo.
high class clinical. She's dusting off that PhD. But what I kind of hear you saying in that is, so here are folks that are doing necrophilia or they're interested in it. Necrophilia is sex with a dead person or somebody that's simulated to be dead.
Right.
And
well,
so-
I studied those that were with partners that were simulating.
And
right.
that's the key, because I hear you saying, when we say the phrase acting out in sex education and sex therapy, we tend to mean doing something you prefer that you didn't that gets you kind of a stub toe.
Right.
And so in this case, these folks could do something that might be considered illegal in Arkansas or wherever they're from. Right. And so how do we navigate them so they can express their need, live out their fantasy in a healthy way, but in a way that's consistent with our real life?
Yeah, no, social mores.
And that might be a partner who's willing and understands. Right. But boy, I can imagine the navigating of that expression, having to help the partner understand, and you coming in and normalizing it and saying, hey, let's not use sin language, shame language. Let's not start with a position of sex negative. Let's start with a position of all ideas welcome, and this is just who I am.
Right.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, in a nutshell, not such a nutshell, what sexologists do.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, and then you currently are at the Exotic Heritage Museum.
Erotic.
Erotic. Sorry.
Erotic.
Which
The Exotic Heritage Museum, very different. Lots of zebras, giraffes.
We're
That's,
more on the
Sex also
zoological
very
side.
good. Yeah, the sex still it's just wonderful. The exhibit's great.
We do have an evolution exhibit, so that counts.
that's true.
Yeah, but it's Erotic Heritage Museum.
Yes.
I've been there and I liked it. It was really interesting. It
is fascinating.
Thank you.
I try
it's
to,
a really cool
I've
place.
bumped in there a couple different times for lectures and things. It's never the same place twice.
Right.
And it's so fascinating. So a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I've heard about that in Las Vegas. You pop in and it's like a porn palace. And it's like, no, it celebrates all erotic art and the history of humanity.
Right.
And a lot of people just discount that. And they think, oh, humanity made numbers and language and, cuneiform tablets and like that's our history. And no, man, like sexuality, expression of sexuality goes all the way back to the caves.
Right.
Sure.
And that's part of what the Erotic Heritage Museum tries to capture. It's not just modern sexuality, ancient sexuality, all historical sexuality.
Right, and we've taken that back as far as at least modern science allows us to, where we spent a year curating an evolution exhibit called The Evolution of Human Sexuality. It's not finished. We did open it.
It's
but
still evolving.
It's still evolving.
Yeah. Always
and,
unfinished.
And a lot of people don't associate evolution with sexuality, even though they're
that is what
so
it is.
tied together.
There is no evolution.
Right.
If we're not pairing it there.
Right. Yeah, but we also have artifacts and art. Some of our artifacts date back to 1500 BCE.
Yes.
From ancient Samaria to Asia.
Wow.
And my favorite, actually, in the museum is I went to Hawaii to investigate a purchase for the museum. And it was this huge worldwide collection. And what sold me on it and how I managed to convince our grand patron to make the investment was there's a set of 3 leaves from India that have erotic art painted on them that are 400 years old.
Oh, my gosh.
And completely intact.
Wow.
And I said, we have to do this. We have to get this collection. It was a big, big purchase, but I managed to convince our grand patron.
And that's there. Yeah. That's at the museum now.
That's at the museum. It took us 2 years to curate.
Oh, my gosh.
And prepare, and we opened it at the beginning of this year.
Whenever your sex exhibits are older than the country,
right?
That's a big deal, and that's so fascinating. I think that she's wearing a shirt right now, which you'll see in our pictures for the show. It's a sex geek, right? Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about her and Dr. Morgan and some of the other folks I've met over at the EHM. They're all sex nerds, and they're academically interested into it. They're culturally interested into it. It's their psychology prowess. What got you interested in sexology and clinical sexology and the whole field of it?
It starts actually when I was 5, and some folks are unsettled by a conversation about children and sexuality, but my story is actually really innocent.
Okay.
I was born in Maine, but spent most of my youth in Germany, where my mother was from. She was an immigrant to the United States. And I was 5, and I remember very clearly coming home from kindergarten on the bus. And was sitting on the chair over the wheel well, and got some funny feelings that I didn't know.
Right.
I had no clue what they were.
The wheels on the bus go round
and round, right? And so I went home to my mom, who was still a stay-at-home mom at that point, and she was ironing in her bedroom. And I went in and did the little girl dance that we do when we have to use the girls' room, and said, Mom, something, I don't know what's going on. I feel weird. And I kind of told her the story, and she sort of half turned around, and she was like, "Oh, sweetie, that's just you growing up," and went right back to ironing. And that was the parenting moment that I fell back on when my children started asking questions.
Right.
Because she didn't shame me. She didn't tell me anything was wrong. She just planted that seed that you are okay.
Yes.
And that's where that springs from. My mom lives like two blocks from my house.
Aww.
Yeah, she's one of my favorite people. And
the little Germany part of Las Vegas?
And the little Germany part of Las Vegas.
Little Deutschland. Yeah. A lot of people don't know it's there.
I know, right?
It's basically the Hofbrauhaus.
Yeah.
That's it. It's one block.
Exactly.
It's Hofbrauhaus and the CVS across the street.
That
is it.
Yeah. And the local bakery. She's always big on the local bakeries. Yeah. But it didn't just solidify my attitude towards myself, but also towards sexuality as a whole. And I just was always really from childhood, I was interested in it. And luckily, when I was still young, my mother, we were living half-time in Germany anyway. So my father was in the military, and so when they divorced, we just moved back to Germany, and that's where I spent my youth until I was a teenager, late teens. And the education system, especially around sexuality, is so progressive.
Yeah.
There's no stigma or shame attached to sexuality, at least the way I was taught growing up in Germany.
So the whole culture of the place, when it comes to sexuality, it's not this, we don't talk about that in polite society.
No, actually, we have a book at the museum that is given to, or at least at the time was given to those that were in grade school. And there are drawn depictions of sexuality and sexual interaction framed in a way that, it's framed so that children understand it.
Right.
And in the teen magazines, they have depictions of teen sexuality.
Interesting.
Not intercourse, at least in the 80s when I was growing up there.
Yeah.
And it was all about love and relationships and the expression of it. And it was just, I never grew up with stigma.
Wow.
Right.
You're the one. 'Cause, I mean,
Well, yeah, and just listening to this is one of the things that has always kind of bothered me about our society, American society, is this idea that parents do not like having that discussion with their kids.
Yeah.
They're like, I'll let the school handle it, or let them do it. I don't want to have that discussion. But compare that to like learning how to drive a car.
right.
Parents don't have that same approach where it's like, let the school do it.
They'll figure it out.
No, they're like hands-on.
They'll learn from their friends.
This is very important.
Yeah.
This is a big piece of life. This could be dangerous if it's not handled appropriately, so I want to be involved. But then when it comes to sex, it's like, no, somebody else.
It's so
I'm too
interesting.
uncomfortable.
Right.
And like what you said about parenting. So I have 2 kids. Mine are very young. I have a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. But the 8-year-old is, he's a little boy and he's up and coming, right? And he's second grade. But already, I think being a therapist and parenting kids is very different because you're constantly aware. I need to not screw this up.
Yeah.
I have seen so many patients, and especially with sexuality. Like, if there's 2 cornerstones of human psychology that I think show up in so many different manifestations of what you called maladaptive behavior, how you were raised, right? Your family of origin, big piece of you, and also sexuality, and we don't talk about it. Even in therapy, I've had men clients, female clients, couples clients that were sitting there working on stuff, and it's like, okay, let's talk about sex, and it's like the air left the room. The quiet, and I'm like, guys, I am literally a therapist. This is probably the safe place, right? We can talk about what you like. And it's like, no, I don't want you. You've been married for 10 years. You don't want them to know what you like? Well, I don't know. They'll judge me. And that gets to what you do.
Oh, that's a whole nother show.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That is a whole nother show.
Yeah, it is. But sexuality is a cornerstone.
It
of
is a
human
cornerstone.
psychology.
I mean, when I was in practice, I had not outing too much. I had a client who had projected his preferences onto me, and in my training, one of the things that I was taught was, as a therapist, you take that and then you examine it. But a lot of therapists are afraid of the projection in and of it. So that, and I just said, okay, that's interesting. Let's have a conversation about your attraction to me.
Call it out.
And it was never a scary thing for me, but it makes a lot of therapists uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right.
We did an episode on transference, and
Yes.
I talked about the one client I've ever had, who did any kind of transference on me, and she offered to take me to, London to get married and run away.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, maybe Paris. But I'm not going to London. They have hot beer. I draw the line at my culinary stuff.
It's room temperature beer, and it's not that bad.
It is exactly
I'm
that
just
bad.
saying you missed an opportunity.
Yeah. The licensing board is taking notes right now.
Well, you always have the podcast to fall back on.
Fall back on the sweet podcasting gig. Do you guys have any internships at the HM? Anything I could just kind of fall back
I
into?
get asked that a lot by therapists in town.
Just checking.
Good.
Put me on the mailing list, please.
Right? Yeah.
So let's dive into this orgy.
Oh, okay. Let's.
All right, I'm going to turn off the lights. Hold on.
Love diving into orgies with 2 guys. It sounds
let's
great.
talk about the orgy now.
So can you tell us a little bit about the backstory? I hadn't heard about the orgy. My husband forwarded me a link to their website or some announcement that they had made, and he said, hey, maybe the museum could get involved with this. So I turned it over to our publicist / event coordinator, and I said, hey, maybe we can get a table, we can be a vendor at one of their events, let me know. And she
sponsored the slip and slide.
Yeah.
Brought to you by the EHM.
Brought to you by the EHM. Our special lube. And she called me back and she said they just lost their space.
Yeah, I remember hearing about
it.
It
happened that day that we contacted them. And
they almost got too much attention.
It
was too successful.
It was a double-edged sword.
Right.
A double-edged sword for sure. And she says, what do you want to do? And I said, well, offer them the museum.
Wow.
Dive
right in there.
I dove right in, and I did contact our owner, and he's a pornographer of the last 50 years.
Right.
He's best friends with Larry Flint, and he's just the guy that never went. Like, he never wanted to have a public persona. Right. He's one of the movers and shakers in the industry. I mean, he's kind of retired now, but
sure.
And he was like, yeah, doc, do whatever you think.
Do
is
whatever
right.
you want.
Yeah,
he wasn't like
we
sex?
have a great relationship, and so I said, yeah, let's do it, and we started organizing it and set it all up. We got all the clearances, we had all the attorneys sign off on it.
Oh my goodness!
And then we put out the press release.
Yeah.
And all hell broke loose.
I saw that. I saw that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was, this last week was unlike anything I've experienced at the museum. And we have a lot of crazy stuff happen at the museum, partly because we cause it. But
all these sex nerds and their
all these
mischief.
sex nerds and right. But all of a sudden I got calls from the city, from law enforcement, from other attorneys. It was just with this descendants upon the museum.
People trying to stop it?
Yeah.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
red taping.
Red tape.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Here.
Well, these are municipal codes, and our attorneys are like, "Here are the laws."
Right.
Actually, you're wrong. And it was there was a series of events that happened, and
Nick and I were wondering just functionally how it was going to be pulled off because we've both been to the EHM. I was thinking bubble wrap. There's going to be bubble wrap all over the floor, and they'll just spray it with lube and just so everybody have fun.
that 2 or 3 weeks beforehand, when we actually had got contracts signed and so forth, it was decided because, and that's when the museum signed on to the study. Right, that I was going to lead because I actually looked up some of the research and there's not a lot on orgies and the dynamics of orgies and the attendees of orgies. The most significant studies I found were 1970 and 1983. Right,
holy cow.
Really, really old.
Yeah,
and so I said, well, let's do something statistical. Let's just start from the basics because if we're trying to do a qualitative, with that many people, it's just I just won't have the manpower to conduct a qualitative study. So we're just going to do statistical.
And a qualitative study for the listener has a lot more to do with like learning the profile of each person there and getting to know their motivations and interviewing them. Whereas a quantitative study can sort of rely on what you can see and hear and just sort of
demographics, numbers, that kind of
big
thing.
Big picture.
Right. So, so one of the reasons why I felt as a clinician that it was qualified to be an orgy at the museum is because it was on one floor in one open space.
I see.
So we were actually going to – the downstairs is now largely political and sex ed, right? So there's not a lot of artifacts that could be harmed by moving things around.
Logistically, you saw a way to make it happen.
Yeah. So we were just going to move everything to the edges. The organizers had gotten drapery to protect what was there, and they had rented a number of beds.
Oh, okay.
And mats and so forth.
Okay.
It's it's 24,000 square feet.
Big.
It's big. And then we were going to do the monitoring from the second floor because there's an open trellis sort of area or balcony area that looks down into the first floor.
Right.
And so that to me made it more solid than say it was just in a building under one roof with a bunch of rooms, right? Where I couldn't really monitor things.
I see.
So that was that's the logistical side of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So once you did the press release, it's a nightmare. Everybody's trying to stop you and saying, hey, red tape, municipalities, blah, blah, blah. It's so funny. Las Vegas gets all protective of its image.
Yes.
That's
what I heard the most.
That's where we draw the line, guys?
Yeah.
That's the one? Orgy went too far?
Yep, the orgy went too far. Yeah.
Noted.
Yep.
David Blaine stabbing people on the Fremont Street was fine, but this is where we're drawing the line.
Yeah. And it kept coming back to that we're now a sports town.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, okay.
Why are you responsible for that?
Right. Yeah. Well,
the Raiders are coming. We have to protect our image.
Right. Yeah.
Come on.
For the Raiders.
Yeah. An orgy would class up Oakland.
Right.
They wish they could be so good as to qualify.
It was bizarre. And, I'm still thinking from the perspective of a sexologist where I'm like, you guys, these people are just coming in to have sex with each other.
Right.
They're the least violent people you'll ever meet. They're just worried about their genitals.
Yeah,
right?
that's all this
is. And sharing them with other people.
And really, if you think about it, you're just doing what every other hotel does, only you're doing it in one space.
Yeah.
In one space,
It's a hotel with, like, clear walls. And like, all those little adjacent doors are open. That's all this is.
Right. And what was interesting is when we had law enforcement come in and I come from half of my family is law enforcement, so military or law enforcement. So I'm very good with law enforcement, and there's always room for improvement. But I come from that background, and when we had law enforcement come in and visit, they were under the misconception that that it was going to happen in the lobby.
Oh, wow.
With the doors open to the public.
Yeah, right out there in the 120
right there.
degree
And
parking
they were like,
lot.
you know, a couple of the
Food trucks.
Food trucks.
right. And so they came in, and as we were sitting there talking, they're like, well, is there any way that you could at least cover your windows? And I'm like,
what?
Wait, what?
Yeah, what are you thinking?
And they're like, well, I'm like, oh, no. It's inside where there are no windows and the doors.
Yeah.
We're locking the building for the day.
Yeah,
and
you have to buy tickets to this. Like,
right, and they were just
it's
like,
not open to the public.
What? And I said, and all the guests have to be vetted by the organizers and are being bussed here. They can't just walk in.
Yeah.
And then the phone calls start, and this was all happening while the phones were going.
Oh my gosh.
Just ringing like crazy about people coming. How much is it to watch?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Everybody
Right?
would say, I would like the viewing area.
Yeah. And I'm just
And then some daring people are like, I'd like to be in the splash zone, please.
Right? Yeah, like people were expecting we had auditorium seats for the orgy. It's like
Sold out like a Knights game.
Yeah.
Damn.
No, this
We had
is
to book
not
T-Mobile
the
Arena for
sports
this
arena,
thing.
you guys. This is not that kind of event.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was crazy.
Oh my
And then when we
gosh.
finally had the press conference on Saturday, and at the end of the week, even the organizers were not letting us know what was going on.
Right.
They were like, look, everything's up in the air right now.
Yeah, it has to be.
And we said, okay, we'll just wait to hear from you. And then when we've had the press conference on Saturday, it was an hour or two before the orgy was to start.
Wow.
They were like, it's been moved to an undisclosed location.
Yeah, and that's what I had seen online in the news.
Mm-hmm.
It was over the weekend. They had said it's been moved to an undisclosed location. Yeah. And, I thought, darn it, I wanted the EHM to be able to host it just because I want the EHM to have notoriety. I thought it would be really good for that.
I think we already do.
I think the mission was
accomplished.
Yeah, the mission was definitely accomplished.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, you know what? I could see where that was a good pivot for them because there could have been so much unsolicited attention. It could have become potentially dangerous.
Right?
And so it actually is better to just go ahead and have it an undisclosed location.
Yeah.
Ticket holders know where it is, and that's sort of it.
Right. And it was in the end I agreed with their decision because even I was starting to get a little unsettled by the attention, and I was concerned about the guest safety.
Right.
And that's what it comes down to. And it's a lot to take on for liability. So the orgy took place.
Right. So they let me know after because I was asked, are you still going to do the study?
Yeah.
And I said, I think so.
Yeah.
That's what I'm planning on. And afterwards, the organizer said, this is where it's been moved to.
Oh, that's exciting.
You're on the list. If you have any of your team that's coming, let us know.
Right.
And I let her know that I had one other person that was going to be doing the research with me and went over there. And unfortunately, the organizers really took on way too much. And part of that was getting the questionnaires printed, which never happened.
Yeah. That's
Right.
hard.
And I found that out when I got there, and I stayed for about 15 minutes, and the gentleman who was working on it with me, who's a professor over at UNLV, we sat in the car for a minute, and he said, well, I guess we could do observation. And I said, I don't want to without the statistics attached. It feels incomplete.
Right.
And the layout of the green door doesn't really lend itself to what I felt was the clinical definition of an orgy.
Right.
There are several rooms there. There are several floors there. It just, at that point, it didn't fit the criteria anymore.
Yeah. What is an orgy? We've been using that word flippantly this whole time.
Right.
We should define it. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of disagreement on that. The organizers felt that an orgy was a gathering of people under one roof, where the sharing of genitals and the observing of sharing of genitals was the definition. Okay, so you didn't actually have to be having sex with someone. If you were within a few feet of someone having sex, you counted.
So we were on this podcast yesterday called Ice Cream Social. Matt
That was
Mattingly's Ice Cream Social.
That was their biggest question.
Matt Donnelly's big question.
Right.
Like he
What's an
zeroed
orgy?
in.
Right.
There was like unbroken eye contact with me 2 feet away. And I was like looking for where his hands were. And he was like, how many people are in it?
Right.
And when does it count?
Right.
And like they're professional comedians. So they, we were crying. We were laughing so hard because they had so many different proposals for what should count and what should not. And that's actually posted. That episode's up right now if you want to check it out. But that clarifies it. So I hear you saying is they don't have to be somebody who's making physical contact with another person. You are a participant if you are
Present.
in proximity and you are observing.
Yep.
And you don't have to necessarily be nude for that.
They didn't specify.
Okay. But
Right.
you're present. You're part of the experience.
You're part of the experience
You're in the
under
cloud.
one roof.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
Got it.
For me, that didn't fit the definition that I needed to have what I thought would be a solid study.
Right. To really do the research.
To really do the research. So I think the definition is still debatable.
Yeah.
But that's the position that the organizers took.
But the orgy did happen.
It did happen.
Approximately how many people do you think?
375.
Holy
Wow.
cow.
Right. So they did not beat the record of 500.
So 374 men and one woman. What a lucky girl. I hope they had caps. Like they're like, hey, we have enough penises.
we were there. We were there watching people go in, and I would say it was really even between men and women.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
300.
375 people was the
people.
final tally.
Now they were trying
If we could
to
just
beat
get
a world
if
record.
we could just get all of them to listen and subscribe to the podcast,
we're set. Yeah.
that would
I
like
want their question.
that would quadruple our numbers, right?
Yeah,
there.
right.
Yeah,
we just want
yeah.
we want the orgy
Right.
demographic. That's
Yeah.
what we've been going for this whole time.
Yeah.
So they were going for a world record. I mean,
They were.
They were saying that it might have been a teaser, it might have been a way to get some attention on it.
No, they did it.
They did
They
it.
did it.
They did it.
Yeah.
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah.
Viva Las Vegas.
Yeah.
We did it. We're number one. 51st
No, we're
in
still
education. Number one in orgies.
Yeah, in America.
Yeah. Oh. So we broke the world record, or we tied it, or what did we do?
No, we did not.
Oh.
The world record's 500.
Oh my God, that is a high standard.
Where was
Yeah,
that at?
that was in Japan.
Oh,
Right. And
Japanese.
They
right,
always
and
cheat us.
from what I understand, it was in fact in one space, like one room, like one big warehouse.
I see.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Japan has everything. You know, they have
Yeah.
cooler phones than us.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
future's already there. They have better
their porn
orgies.
is way more risque than ours here.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm just going to, America, are you going to take this?
Right.
You know, are we going to stand up? Are we going to keep coming in second? Literally?
Maybe this is what he meant when he said "Make America Great
Make
Again."
America.
Oh.
You know, I passed the buck
Viva
to
la
Donald Trump.
Stormy.
Yeah. I passed the Mr. President,
Right.
lead us.
This,
Yeah.
this
Lead
happened
us.
under your watch.
Right.
Under your watch.
Maybe
I mean,
some of
would
that-
Hillary have gotten 501?
Yeah. No.
Maybe.
Maybe.
We don't know.
It depends. We don't know.
You know, the popular was there.
Yeah. Right.
She had the people support. So I give it to Donald Trump. So when it comes to orgies, 375 people.
Yeah.
A big, huge mountain
That's
of sex.
pretty amazing.
What are the rules, Doc? You know, what are the rules of an orgy? What are the rules of etiquette? I mean, do's
Right.
and don'ts. So you're John Doe. You walk in there, you say, okay, I've mustered up the courage to do this. I bought this ticket.
Well,
What
no,
do I
you got to
do?
remember that there weren't a lot of John Does allowed.
Single men.
You had to be in
Yeah.
a couple
I see.
predominantly.
Okay,
Oh.
so a couple
Right.
comes in, John and Jane,
Yeah.
and they bought their ticket,
Right, and
flew
they
out
see
here to
another
Las
John and
Vegas.
Jane.
I
Right.
see.
Right,
Yeah. So what's the etiquette? What's the protocol?
Right. Well, so, we're obviously having a big.
It's like Animal House, right? You just dive.
No. Well, we're having a big conversation
Crowd
nationally
surfing.
about consent right now, obviously.
Yes.
So, consent is huge
Yes.
in these environments.
And even in an orgy, where we all
Yes,
know why you're there.
especially in an
You've all
orgy.
signed up for this.
Yep.
We're here for the same reason. You
Yep.
bought the ticket, I bought the ticket.
Right.
But there still has to somehow be a communication, even with a crowd
of people.
Naked people.
Naked people with their genitals all over the place.
And I imagine
Yeah.
that there must be, I mean, in real terms, I mean, obviously there's an ideal version,
Mm-hmm.
which, person A says to person B, are you okay with this? Person B communicates to person A, I'm absolutely okay with this, let's go.
Right.
Ideally, that's how we want things to go, but I imagine the magic of the orgy, there's a lot of nonverbal probably there as well.
Since I didn't stay to observe some of the other orgies, though, that I have attended, the conversation actually starts when someone decides they want to join. So a lot of times people watch,
I see.
right? And that I think that is about where the nonverbal communication ends.
Right.
Is with the watching, but if someone, there's no touching, no getting involved without saying, may I touch, or may
Interesting.
I get involved, or may I participate.
And generally,
Right.
people are kind of prepped on this. There's
Yes.
something in writing out
Yep.
there, or it's
Yep.
on their ticket. It says,
They're
hey,
told
reminder.
that before they go in. There are signs.
The rule of law still
Yeah.
applies here.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. We're
Yep.
not, didn't magically teleport into international
No.
waters.
Right.
Like,
It's just because you're at an orgy doesn't mean you want to have sex with everybody.
right.
Right.
Interesting.
So someone might approach you that wants wants to have sex with you, and there's nothing for you that
You don't want to do
you
it.
don't want to do it.
And I would also imagine because of, we talk about fetishes, we talk about sexual orientation. There's men and women there, and there's some women that might be bi or lesbian and comfortable with that. There's some men that might be gay or bi, but then there's also those that are there to be straight, and that's what they want today. And there's not like they're wearing like a rubber band that, okay, the blue ones are, the yellow ones are just offering global consent, like what they're.
Well, I think it goes even more intimately than that, because some people might want to perform oral and not have it performed on them.
Interesting.
Right? And some people might want to have anal sex and some people might not, or any kind of penetration. Maybe they just want oral. So all that stuff has to be navigated.
It's a lot of communication that has to happen
Yeah.
and still not lose the energy, you know, and keep the moment going.
Right.
So, but orgies, it sounds like what you're saying is if a person walks into an orgy, they should anticipate needing to communicate to others.
Yes.
They should not just take it as global consent.
No.
They need to talk to people, unless
Yes.
you're watching, in which case enjoy.
Right.
But if you're trying to make contact, you need to ask that individual, hi, my name is Jason. Are you interested in this? Is this okay?
Right.
And they will communicate what they're open to.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah,
boy.
yeah.
That it just feels like a lawyer's nightmare. Just like, oh God.
So what was the research, the data that you wanted to collect?
Really, I wanted to find out where these people come from. What the questions that I asked were largely demographic.
Okay.
Almost like a sex census.
Yeah, let's go through the census. Teach us the survey.
So it started with what is your current age, right? And that was an open-ended question.
Sure.
And then the rest of the questions were like,
was the event prohibited for under 18, or did they
yes.
just not ask? Okay, so
yeah, it was
they put
prohibited
that in
for
front
under
of
18
themselves.
because it's a non-alcohol establishment.
Right.
So anyone 18 and over that was part of that
sensical. They don't want the feds kicking in the
door.
door.
The event.
Right.
They had to be part of the Menage a Life event.
Okay.
And then it was things like what is, and I tried to break it down. A lot of people don't think of sexual orientation and preference in the same. They think it's the same thing.
Oh, right.
So I asked, what is your sex?
Yeah.
What is your gender?
Right.
Identity? What is your sexual identification? Heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, etc. What is your relationship identity? Polyamorous, monogamous, non-monogamous,
Right.
etc. So I tried to have it be a very sex positive questionnaire that broke down those different aspects. And then what was the age at which you had a sexual experience for the first time? I didn't want to define it as intercourse because sex and
What could that
intercourse
be?
don't have to
Right.
be the same thing.
Right.
And then when did you first at what age did you first participate in an orgy?
Wow.
Or a group sexual experience, not
Okay.
orgy. I didn't use that language. So that was the survey basically broken down, and I think we could have gleaned incredible information from that. Yeah.
Teach me what the research value of asking the question about first sexual experience. Why is that something a sexologist is very curious about, to learn your sexual origin story and where you began?
Well, as sexologists, at least in my training, one of the foundations was learning how to do a Kinsian sex history. And when I was in practice, one of the things, if I came in with someone that was really struggling with the sexual issue, it was the first thing I did was a sex history, because that might just go all the way back and be a behavior that is common for them, right? And they might have self-judged or been judged by someone else when it was just who they are. So finding that information out can tell you a lot of things. It can tell you potentially what kind of sex education they had growing up. If it's super young, why? If they had a sexual experience at the age of 8 or 9 or at 22, 23.
Right.
So you can glean a little bit of information from that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're not going to get detail.
Yeah.
But you can start to recognize what their attitude might be towards sexuality.
And what you just said, their attitude, offline before the show, we were talking a little bit about how this country with 50 states is almost like little countries, and like each place is a fundamental different view.
Right.
And,
so if they said, one of the things is, what's your state? Where you live? The state you live in. If they're coming from Arkansas and the age of first sexual activity is 22, well, that's going to tell me something different than if they're from New York and their first sexual experience was at the age of 15.
Right.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
or
a
if
whole
they're
different place.
opposite.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you can tell a lot from that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So, when we think about sex therapy, when we think about sexologists, here now people are introduced, probably for the first time, most of our listeners, to what this discipline is. If they're hearing this and they go, you know what, that's the kind of person I need to meet with. I have some stuff that falls into the purview of what they're describing, or our couple has some stuff, or we've thought about becoming polyamory in our relationship, or whatever their interest is.
Yeah, and I have gynecologists that still refer their patients to me because they're a lot of times that the person that has MD on the end of their name is really uncomfortable with sexuality.
Yes.
Yeah,
I have
they
noticed
can
that.
do surgery for cancer, reproductive cancer, but when it comes to actually
Don't
sexual
talk about
functioning,
my pee-pee.
right? They're just like, here, let me just give your and I was like, well, I'm not in practice anymore. Well,
Right.
maybe you can. You're still an educator. It's like, okay.
Can you teach the listener, if they're out there and thinking, man, I really want to find somebody like that to meet with, what resources are out there? Where would a person go to start learning about professionals in their area that they might be able to sync up with?
So that's the challenge, and that was one of the challenges for me as a practitioner. There is no licensing board for sexologists. If you come from another discipline, say psychology or sociology or whatever, there are licensing boards, and then you can go on and do, postgraduate research or education in human sexuality. Sexologists, that's all we do, and we do it from all of the disciplines, right? And because of that, the psychologists, the sociologists, the psychiatrists, the MDs, etc., no one can agree on who owns sex. So no one can agree on which licensing board is going to license sexologists.
Right. I see.
So those of us that are sexologists, we're going, well,
okay, so even if,
what do we do? So
it's a story of all states that their laws are always lagging behind real life. But sexology as a discipline, regardless of its license, it exists.
It does.
These educators are there to educate.
Right, so we can be educators.
Yeah.
So I think there are 2 or 3 sexologists, at least in Las Vegas, that are in quote unquote
Only
in
2 or
practice.
3.
Yeah, not very many.
Now we have
sexologists.
we
Now
have
there are a
folks
lot
across
of
the
sex
country.
therapists.
Okay.
Right. So so look at the training. How
Okay.
many hours of training does say a psychologist have, or a
Right.
sociologist have, or an MFT
in sexuality.
In sexuality, there
Is
are
there
a lot of really good sex therapists.
Is there a database, a website, a professional platform that a lot of folks might subscribe to that somebody living in California could say, you know what, I'm going to type that into Google and see if I can find somebody in my area?
As far as I know, psychology.com has a database that's available online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. A therapist and provider database that's nationwide.
Very cool.
As for, they're kind of scattered all over the place. You might be able to find them through ASECT.
That's what I was thinking
Right.
was ASECT. Yeah.
Yeah, you might be able to find practititioners and therapists through ASECT. But since I'm really not in that field anymore, I'm in the museum sciences now.
I
so.
get it. And ASECT, for the listener, we've talked about it before, but I believe it's the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists.
Yes.
Yes. Ding, ding, ding. I
Yeah,
got it right
I
on the
believe
first
that's
try.
correct.
Is it just asect.com?
It's AASECT.
Right.
And I think it's .com.
Right.
But if you just type that into Google,
Right.
that's a really good resource.
That's a good resource, and Quad S is another good resource. Those are more on the medical, biological side, MDs, whereas ASECT is more the educators, therapists,
Right.
etc. But I think between the two, you can probably find someone in
Well,
in
I
your
feel
area.
like we have learned a lot, and we have probed the depth of wisdom and research and scholarly ability of Dr. Hartmann. But now I'm wondering, are you able to stick around and hear some just horrible and perverted questions from our listeners?
Anything. That's my favorite.
All right, today's the day.
So we,
today's the day.
we opened
We had
this
a
up
good
to our,
podcast for a long time. I feel like we got a solid 25 episodes in, and it's fun to have you on
20
the last one.
25 is a good number to end
That's
on.
a good one. Yeah, solid. This will be the day we go out of business.
So we opened this up to our listeners, and that may have been a huge mistake.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've got one question. How extensive is the background check for that? I'm sure I'm STD free, but my credit may not be up to snuff.
It's like with
That
the
is
orgy.
so good.
You don't do
Oh my
a credit
God.
check then, I'm guessing.
Right. So
600, get out.
So really the two industries have the most rigorous testing. Of course, the adult industry, where they do an STI panel every 2 weeks, and then
Wow.
our brothel industry, which does it weekly. But when you're going to a sex party, or you're going to an orgy, most people aren't showing up with their papers. So they did have a condom sponsor, which was the talent testing service here in town. They have a civilian wing.
Oh, wow.
And so they provided 2,000 condoms.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And we have their literature at the museum as well. They're great because we work, we associate a lot with the adult industry that's here. But condoms.
Yeah.
There is no guarantee that you aren't going to be exposed to something at a place where, testing papers aren't being provided. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So, but no credit check.
No credit check.
Oh, thank God.
No.
Okay.
Don't
So
care about your credit. Just
if you've
care about your junk.
That's right. If you've declared bankruptcy, you can still bang.
That's right.
Lucky you, Donald
Don't
Trump.
care if you got a car or not. Right? Yeah.
Next question. What was the funniest thing that you've ever seen at an orgy, and why was it Nick Tangeman? Oh, wait a minute. That's not cool. Skip that one.
No, but I mean, people must have to have a sense of humor, at
You
these
do.
things.
Like, so my favorite, first of all, I really don't ever see something that I don't find just wonderful at any kind of sex event. But I went to an orgy in Portland, Oregon about, years and years ago when I was first getting into school. And first of all, it was really great anyway to see everybody having this energy. And then there was this one older couple that I'll never forget because they were both in togas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this was just your average event, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a themed event or anything.
Yeah.
And he had a stuffed kangaroo with him.
Yes.
And she had a paddle.
Yes.
And I'm like, I was
Love
with my
it.
husband at the time. I was like, baby, you go play. I'm going to go follow.
Yeah.
So, and
must
they had
study
this,
this.
they had this like little room where they were broadcasting what was going on onto the big giant jumbotron in the dance hall.
Damn.
Yeah. And so they went in and it was funny because even though they were older, they had to be in their 60s. They had this incredible electricity between the two of them. And I was like, what's going on with these two? And, there was a little couch there in front of the camera, and he bent over and started to penetrate the kangaroo.
Okay.
While she spanked him.
Wow.
And that was their thing in their
Yes.
togas. And I'm
Yes.
like, oh my God, that's so great.
I like
So
the
great.
combination, right? Like the combination of all these things together.
Yes, it was like furry kinda and
Yeah.
a little bit of kinky BDSM.
Yeah, some
and
ancient thrown in
ancient
there with the
thrown in there.
toga.
It
The
was
role
so
play is
great.
very solid. I feel like there needs to be commentary. Like I want there to be ESPN sports commentators or watching
Well,
thing and going,
yeah.
It
and now
almost-
he's bending over. She
Yeah.
pulls out the spank. Here it comes.
Yeah.
Wind up, and it's that's a good crack on the left cheek.
What almost seems like there was
The kangaroo's just taking it really
This
well.
kangaroo is a champ.
like you just write down ideas of just random objects. You put it in a hat. You
Yes.
draw three.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
let's put these three together.
Yeah. So
yeah.
like sex Mad Libs. That's what I'm thinking here. Is like there's a paragraph that Dr. Hartmann writes out, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, you got to fill this in with
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
You be bold, and then you make that happen.
It
Okay.
was great. It was so great.
That is a good answer to a good question.
That was good.
Next question. Was this orgy the reason Las Vegas is losing the Stanley Cup? Are the players exhausted?
Ah, yes. What is the scientific connection? So, if all of our hockey players are constantly having nonstop orgy sex, that might explain. But they were in Washington at the time.
They were. They
They were.
weren't here.
They were in
They were
Washington.
not here.
Plus-
So unless they had doppelgangers, they
That
were
could
not
happen.
here.
One could argue that maybe they would play better
if they were there.
Right?
Yes. You know what's interesting?
Yeah.
So back whenever I was a student at UNLV and I lived in the dorms, I was on a floor with like all the student athletes. And I knew several members of female sports, female golf team, female basketball team. And one day they were explaining to me that their coach had pulled them aside and said, hey, never have sex before game day. Like,
I've heard that.
And it was like, and I was like, what? Your coach talked to you about that? And
Yeah.
they're like, yes, because we have to perform, man. Like, we're not going to be having any kind of like hangover effect here or anything going on. And I thought that was really interesting. It's like, oh, wow. So
Well,
athletes have to think
I
about
would
that.
almost wonder if not having sex increases their ability for aggression.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was
Right?
wondering too.
Yeah.
So they
That's
can be
what I was
more
thinking.
aggressive.
Yeah. That's an interesting
Because,
thing.
bonobos,
yeah.
they're sort of kind of chill because they're
Bonobos.
always having sex.
Yeah,
right?
primates. So, and that's so funny because when I think of sex psychology, it's one of the very first lessons I'd ever learned was they studied chimpanzees, which are historically very violent,
Yeah.
they're very tribal, and bonobos, who are very peaceful. They
Yeah,
get
it's
along.
matriarchal,
And
yeah.
they all have sex. Like and I was watching
Well, when
this
they have a
documentary.
threat, when they have another primate come into their tribe, they don't attack them. The matriarchs go over and just have sex with them.
And then they chill.
And they're like, okay, we're chilling.
Yeah, and like you go to the zoo and there's like, this bonobo kind of get aggressive or whatever, and then like the female bonobos pull him, beside the bush, and then all of a sudden you see him come out with a cigarette and he's just kind of like leaning against the bench and he's like checking his phone.
Just
and
makes
I'm
you
like,
wonder how that would affect the world order.
Yeah.
I don't know if there'd be a lot of war.
Send a platoon to North Korea.
Yeah.
Like, hi, we're here to take care of business. World peace in 30 minutes or less.
Right.
I surrender. It sounds good.
Yeah.
And our last question. Jim says his invitation was lost in the mail. He was actually rejected because of the last incident.
That is
right?
a statement. Oh, there's a question mark at the end. So the
Is
listener,
that a question?
The listener says that that I was rejected because of the last incident that happened at the orgy. You can be thrown out of an orgy, can't you? You can be escorted out.
If you violate any of the consent rules, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Is it like mob justice? Does everybody just get up and like point to the door and like boo this man?
Oh,
boo,
yeah.
Get out.
I think people are too distracted, but they have consent monitors that'll tap you and say,
Oh, so there is like some security there.
Yeah. They had consent monitors, yeah.
Okay, I got to zoom in on that. What an interesting idea. Because a lot of people that are hearing about this, they've heard about the fiction of an orgy, but you realize, no, it's a real thing.
Yes.
And it's done in a civilized way.
Absolutely.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah,
and so the consent monitors
They had 7 or 8 consent monitors that were just, making their rounds, and if you were not seeking consent properly, you were removed or asked to leave. Yeah.
Well, Dr.
No, I
Victoria
didn't hear that
Hartmann-
anyone was asked to leave, so I think everyone was doing
Everybody
That's
was
good.
on. Well, when you
Everybody
pay
was well
$250 for a ticket, you're
Yeah.
going to mind your freaking manners.
Yeah.
Dr. Hartmann, thank you so much for coming. If you're out there and you want to follow Dr. Hartmann on Twitter, I believe it's at Dr. Victoria.
Correct.
All spelled out, DOCTOR, Victoria. And she actually has a great show called Baking Naked.
I do. So my co-host and I, Joshua Coram, who is a professor at UNLV, we have this fantastic show called Baking Naked on Patreon.com.
It is really cool. And you can check that out on YouTube, Baking Naked, and you can kind of get clips and see a little bit about it. It is something you have to see to understand.
Yeah.
But if you like sweets, if you like baking, if you like sex education,
And
if you
nudity.
like gratuitous nudity,
Yes.
this is the show for you.
Yes.
And it is chipper and upbeat and a lot of fun. And then we strongly encourage listeners, go to the Erotic Heritage Museum. You can take a tour. It's very fun. It just crashes through a lot of what you think it's going to be, and it's very approachable, and it's easy to do, and it's a lot of fun. Erotic
you.
Heritage Museum. Is that eroticheritagemuseum.com?
EroticMuseumVegas.com.
And their Twitter is Erotic Heritage.
It's Erotic Museum LV.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of fun. That's in Las Vegas. So follow Dr. Victoria, support what their projects are, support Baking Naked, and definitely go check out the Erotic Heritage Museum. And if you're interested in the next orgy, just Google that. Google.
Just come on by. We'll give you a
upcoming
list.
orgy every Friday in Las Vegas. Thank you, Dr. Victoria, for being a part of this.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. Thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us facebook.com/podtherapy or on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm the Orgy Kangaroo.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
I like how Dr. Victoria's trying to not laugh into the mic.